The city roared with the usual chaos of rush hour, honking cars, chattering pedestrians, and the occasional out-of-tune street performer. Evan Kane darted through the throng, sweat beading on his forehead, his exosuit humming with a soft, mechanical whir. His focus wasn't on the people or the noise, but on the monstrous creature bounding ahead of him, a creature that had no business existing outside a prehistoric nightmare. Target is heading east on 5th. Evan shouted into his earpiece. Somebody clear this street, or we're going to have a lot of lawsuits on our hands. The velociraptor, sleek and terrifying, turned its head and snarled at him, its jagged teeth glinting in the sunlight. But this was no ordinary velociraptor. Its forearms gleamed with metallic plating, and its eyes glowed an unnatural red, evidence of the bio-cybernetic enhancements that made it faster, stronger, and far deadlier than any dinosaur nature had ever produced. Evan pressed a button on his wrist, activating the exosuit's thrusters. With a deafening roar, he launched himself forward, the ground blurring beneath him. He had the creature in his sights, his hand reaching for the grappling mechanism embedded in his suit's arm. Just one well-placed shot would end this madness. Then, with a loud crack, the entire arm of his exosuit broke free, hurtling past the velociraptor and smashing through the glass front of a cafe. There was a moment of stunned silence before the screaming started again. Coffee splattered everywhere, patrons dove for cover, and the cafe sign wobbled before crashing to the ground in a spectacular display of sparks and debris. Are you kidding me? Evan groaned, skidding to a halt and staring at the stump where his suit's arm used to be. I paid for the warranty on this thing. The velociraptor didn't wait for him to collect his thoughts. With a guttural roar, it pounced. Evan barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side as its claws tore through the air where his chest had been. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. His grappling arm was gone, his suit was malfunctioning, and he was about to be ripped apart by a dinosaur with a bad attitude. Desperate, he grabbed the lid of a nearby trash can and held it up like a shield. The velociraptor lunged again, and Evan swung the lid with all his strength, catching the creature across the snout. It stumbled back, snarling in fury. For a moment, Evan thought he might actually have a chance. Then the velociraptor reared back and spat a glob of corrosive bile directly at him. Ah, come on. Evan yelped, diving out of the way. The bile hit the pavement instead, sizzling and eating away at the concrete. He didn't want to think about what it would have done to his face. With no other options, Evan resorted to his favorite weapon, improvisation. He grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, yanked the pin, and sprayed the velociraptor with a cloud of foam. The creature shrieked, momentarily blinded, and Evan took the opportunity to tackle it to the ground. They tumbled together in a chaotic mess of claws, limbs, and mechanical parts, until Evan finally managed to pin the velociraptor under his weight. You're going back to the lab, he growled, pulling a syringe from his belt. Whether you like it or not. The velociraptor hissed in protest, but Evan plunged the syringe into its neck, injecting a tranquilizer that took effect almost instantly. The creature's struggles slowed, then ceased altogether. Evan let out a sigh of relief, collapsing onto the ground beside it. His relief was short-lived. His earpiece crackled to life, and a cold, sarcastic voice filled his ear. Well done, Kane. Another textbook example of subtlety and professionalism. Evan groaned. Good to hear from you too, Dr. Voss. I assume you saw the whole thing? Oh, I did, Dr. Nadia Voss replied, her tone dripping with disdain. And so did half the city, thanks to the dozens of phones recording your little performance. Congratulations, you've gone viral. Back at the lab, Evan sat in a steel chair, his exosuit stripped away for repairs. Dr. Voss loomed over him, her sharp features twisted into an expression of disappointment. Behind her, monitors displayed grainy footage of the chase, complete with commentary from laughing spectators. This is unacceptable, Voss snapped, pacing the room like a general chewing out an incompetent soldier. Do you have any idea how much damage control I have to do because of you? It's not my fault the suit malfunctioned, Evan shot back. Maybe if you stopped cutting corners on the tech, don't you dare blame this on the tech. Voss interrupted, pointing a manicured finger at him. The problem isn't the suit. The problem is you. You were supposed to be the perfect blend of human and dinosaur DNA, a living weapon that could take down any threat. Instead, you're a walking disaster. Your enhancements are unstable, your reflexes are unpredictable, and don't even get me started on the muscle spasms. As if on cue, Evan's left arm twitched violently, knocking over a stack of papers on a nearby desk. He grimaced. Yeah, well, nobody's perfect. Voss sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. If it weren't for the fact that I need someone expendable to clean up this mess, I'd have you decommissioned. Evan raised an eyebrow. Decommissioned? That's a fancy way of saying put down, isn't it? Before Voss could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and a robotic voice announced, "Security breach detected. All personnel, report to designated safe zones." Evan and Voss exchanged a look, then bolted out of the room. In the main control center, a wall of monitors displayed the source of the breach, a live broadcast from an unknown location. On the screen was Marcus Red, the leader of the Red Scales terrorist organization, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "Greetings, citizens of the world," Red said, his voice smooth and menacing. "I am here to announce the dawn of a new era. For too long, humanity has clung to its fragile, outdated form, ignoring the potential for true evolution. But no more. Thanks to the wonders of genetic science, I have created a new race of beings, stronger, faster, and more powerful than any human or animal. Behold the future." The camera panned to reveal a group of hybrid creatures, each one more horrifying than the last. There was a Triceratops human hybrid with armor-like skin, a pterodactyl man with razor-sharp wings, and a towering T-Rex humanoid that let out a deafening roar. "These are my Red Scales," Red continued. "And they are unstoppable. Surrender your governments, your militaries, and your outdated ways of life, or face extinction." The broadcast ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Voss was the first to speak. "They stole the technology," she muttered, her face pale. "Those bastards stole my technology." Evan folded his arms. "I thought you said it was our technology." "Don't get cute," Voss snapped. "This is serious. If Red unleashes those hybrids, it'll be a global catastrophe." "And whose fault is that?" Evan shot back. "You're the one who made this tech in the first place." "Save the moralizing for someone else," Voss said. "Right now, we need a plan. And you, Kane, are going to be the one to execute it." Evan snorted. "Me? Why? Because I'm expendable?" "No," Voss replied, her voice icy. "Because you're the only one dumb enough to try." The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate the Red Scales, gather intel, and eliminate the hybrids. But as Evan stared at the jungle compound on the horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a death trap. "Remember," Voss's voice crackled in his earpiece, "you're posing as a rogue operative looking to sell bio-enhancement tech. Don't blow your cover." "Relax," Evan muttered, adjusting the makeshift disguise Voss had provided. "I'm great at pretending to be something I'm not." "Clearly," Voss replied dryly. "That's how you got through high school." Evan rolled his eyes and pushed forward, his boots crunching against the jungle floor. The compound was heavily guarded, with sentries patrolling the perimeter and drones buzzing overhead. Evan kept to the shadows, his enhanced senses alert for any signs of danger. He approached the main gate, where a hulking hybrid guard blocked his path. The creature was part human, part ankylosaurus, with a club-like tail and bony plates covering its body. "State your business," the guard growled, its voice gravelly and inhuman. Evan held up a briefcase filled with fake bio-enhancement schematics. "I've got something your boss might be interested in." The guard narrowed its eyes, then stepped aside. "Follow me." Evan was led through the compound, his mind racing as he took in the scale of the operation. Scientists in lab coats worked alongside hybrids, splicing genes and creating new abominations. Rows of cages lined the walls, each one containing a creature more horrifying than the last. In the center of it all was Marcus Red, seated on a throne-like chair and flanked by his lieutenants, including a towering T-Rex hybrid named Juno. Red smiled as Evan approached, his sharp features and piercing eyes radiating confidence. "Welcome," Red said, his voice smooth as silk. "I hear you have something to offer me." Evan forced a grin, holding up the briefcase. "Let's just say it's the future of warfare." Red's smile widened. "I like the sound of that." Marcus Red's calculating eyes lingered on Evan as the rogue operative turned test subject set the briefcase on the table with a calculated nonchalance. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of machinery and the guttural growls of hybrids patrolling the compound. Juno, the massive T-Rex hybrid, loomed nearby, her presence a reminder of just how quickly things could go south. Evan forced a grin as he cracked open the briefcase. Inside were neatly arranged documents, fabricated blueprints of bio-enhancement tech Voss had thrown together at the last minute. To the untrained eye, it was cutting edge. To someone like Red, it was just convincing enough to start a conversation. "This," Evan said, gesturing to the blueprints, "is what the lab coats back home don't want you to see. A step beyond enhancements. Evolution on demand. The kind of thing that could take even your impressive work to the next level." Red leaned forward, his expression curious but cautious. "And why?" he asked, his voice smooth and measured. "Would someone like you bring this to me instead of using it for your own gain?" Evan's mind raced. He knew this moment was critical. Red was the type to smell a lie from a mile away. He let his smile fade slightly, feigning bitterness. "Because the people I worked for," he said, letting a hint of anger creep into his voice. "They screwed me over. Promised me the world, then left me with nothing but scars and a malfunctioning prototype of what I could have been. You're the real deal. You see the bigger picture. I want in on that." Red studied him for a moment, then glanced at Juno. "What do you think?" he asked. Juno snorted, her predatory gaze fixed on Evan. "He reeks of desperation. But desperation can be useful, if it's honest." Red chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Honesty is a rare commodity these days. But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Mr. Kane." Evan froze for a fraction of a second. Red had used his real name. "Don't look so surprised," Red said with a smirk. "You didn't think I'd let just anyone walk into my base without doing a little digging, did you? I know exactly who you are. The so-called failed experiment from Dr. Voss's little lab. A cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong." Evan's heart pounded in his chest. He forced himself to meet Red's gaze, feigning indifference. "If you already know who I am, then you know why I'm here. I've got nothing left to lose." Red's smile widened. "Good. Because if you're lying to me, I'll make sure you lose the one thing you do have left, your miserable life." Evan nodded, swallowing hard. "Fair enough." Red gestured to one of the guards. "Take him to the holding cells. I want a full sweep of his tech and background. If he checks out, we'll see just how useful he can be." As the guard escorted him away, Evan's mind raced. His cover was hanging by a thread, and he had no idea how long he could maintain it. But he had one advantage: they hadn't killed him yet. That meant they saw potential in him, and he'd have to exploit that for as long as he could. The holding cell was dimly lit, its walls lined with reinforced steel. Evan sat on the cot, trying not to flinch as his muscles twitched involuntarily, a side effect of his unstable enhancements. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. The mission wasn't over yet. A few hours later, the door creaked open, and a familiar face stepped inside, Lila, the scientist he'd been briefed about. Her lab coat was rumpled, and dark circles under her eyes betrayed the stress of her situation. She carried a tablet, her expression carefully neutral. "You're Kane," she said, glancing at the tablet. "The one Red's got his eye on." Evan raised an eyebrow. "And you're Lila. The one who's supposed to be working for him but doesn't seem too happy about it." Her eyes darted to the camera in the corner of the room. "Careful," she murmured, keeping her voice low. "They're always watching." Evan leaned back against the wall, lowering his voice as well. "Then let's give them a show. You're here to interrogate me, right? Figure out if I'm worth keeping alive?" Lila nodded, stepping closer. She kept her tone clinical, her words calculated to sound like routine questioning to anyone listening. "Red wants to know what your enhancements are capable of. Specifically, if they've managed to stabilize your DNA or if you're still volatile." Evan smirked. "Volatile's a good word for it. But I'm guessing you already know that. You used to work for Voss, didn't you?" Her eyes flicked toward the camera again, then back to him. "You talk too much. And you're trying too hard to pretend you're not in over your head," he shot back. "Look, I know why you're really here. Red doesn't trust me, and he's probably using you to figure out if I'm a threat. So let's cut the crap. You don't want to be here any more than I do. Maybe we can help each other." Lila hesitated, her fingers tightening around the tablet. For a moment, Evan thought she might walk away. But then she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you're serious about taking him down," she said, "then you're going to need more than charm and half-baked enhancements. Red's got a virus, an airborne gene-splicing agent. He's planning to release it at the UN summit in 3 days. If he succeeds, every human on the planet will start transforming into hybrids." Evan's stomach turned. "And you're just telling me this now?" "Because I didn't know if I could trust you," she snapped. "But if you really want to stop him, you'll need access to the central lab. That's where he's keeping the virus and his research." Evan nodded, his mind racing. "Then get me in there. I'll handle the rest." Lila gave him a long, searching look. "I hope you know what you're doing, Kane. Because if you screw this up, it won't just be your life on the line, it'll be everyone's." The next day, Evan found himself in the central lab, flanked by guards as Lila led him through the facility. The lab was a stark contrast to the rest of the compound, bright, sterile, and humming with activity. Scientists moved between workstations, their faces grim as they worked on the final stages of the virus. Evan kept his expression neutral, his eyes scanning the room for anything that might give him an advantage. He spotted a row of containment chambers along the far wall, each one filled with a different hybrid creature in various stages of development. The sight made his skin crawl. "Impressive, isn't it?" Red's voice drawled from behind him. Evan turned to see the terrorist leader striding into the lab, his ever-present smile firmly in place. Juno followed close behind, her massive frame casting a shadow over the room. "It's certainly ambitious," Evan said carefully. Red chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "Ambition is what separates the weak from the strong, my friend. And you're about to witness the culmination of that ambition." He gestured toward the center of the room, where a cylindrical chamber housed a swirling, greenish mist, the virus. "This is the future," Red said, his voice filled with pride. "A world where the weak are transformed into the strong. Where humanity sheds its flaws and becomes something greater." Evan forced a smile. "Sounds like quite the sales pitch." Red's eyes narrowed. "And you? Do you believe in this vision?" Evan hesitated for the briefest of moments, then nodded. "I believe in power. And this? This is power." Red seemed satisfied with the answer, but Juno wasn't so easily convinced. She stepped closer, her reptilian eyes boring into Evan. "Power requires loyalty," she said. "Are you loyal, Kane?" Evan met her gaze, his heart pounding. "Loyalty is earned," he said. "Show me what you can do, and I'll show you where my loyalty lies." For a moment, the tension was so thick it felt like the air might crackle. Then Red laughed, breaking the silence. "Well said. Juno, let the man prove himself. He'll earn his place soon enough." As Red turned away, Evan caught a fleeting look of suspicion in Juno's eyes. He knew she wasn't convinced. And that meant he had to move fast. When Lila slipped him a keycard later that night, Evan knew it was time to act. The central lab was heavily guarded, but he'd memorized the patrol routes and security protocols during his earlier visit. It was risky, but he didn't have a choice. Slipping past the guards, he made his way to the containment chambers. His goal was simple: disable the virus and destroy the research. But as he approached the main console, a low growl stopped him in his tracks. Juno emerged from the shadows, her massive frame blocking his path. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "I knew you were lying," she hissed. "And now, you're going to die for it." Juno lunged, her massive jaws snapping inches from Evan's face as he rolled to the side, barely avoiding the strike. Her claws raked the air where he'd been standing moments before, tearing deep gouges into the steel floor. Evan scrambled to his feet, adrenaline surging as he backed toward the console, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no backup, and no time to waste. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," he muttered, circling cautiously. Juno snarled, her breath hot and foul as she advanced. "You think you're clever, sneaking in here like a rat? But you're just another failed experiment. A broken little man playing hero." "Yeah," Evan replied, scanning the room for anything he could use as a weapon. "At least I'm not a walking science project gone wrong." Juno roared in fury and charged. Evan darted toward the nearest workstation, grabbing a heavy piece of lab equipment, a steel canister filled with compressed gas. As Juno closed the distance, he swung it with all his strength, the impact landing squarely on her jaw. She staggered, momentarily dazed, and Evan took the chance to dive toward the console. The keycard slid into the reader with a satisfying beep. The terminal lit up, displaying the virus's containment protocols. Evan's fingers flew across the keyboard, overriding the system's locks. Warning messages flashed across the screen, but he ignored them, his focus laser-sharp. Behind him, Juno shook off the blow and let out a guttural growl. "You won't get away with this," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. Evan didn't look back. "Newsflash," he said, tapping the final command, "I already am." The chamber housing the virus hissed as its containment field deactivated. The swirling green mist inside began to dissipate, the deadly agent neutralized by the fail-safe protocols Evan had triggered. A shrill alarm blared, signaling the system's shutdown. Juno roared in rage and lunged again, but this time, Evan was ready. He slammed his fist down on a nearby control panel, activating a blast of high-pressure steam from one of the lab's ventilation systems. The scalding plume hit Juno head-on, sending her reeling with a pained scream. Evan didn't wait to see the aftermath. He bolted toward the exit, his enhanced speed propelling him through the labyrinth of corridors. His earpiece crackled to life, Lila's voice cutting through the din of alarms. "What's going on? The whole base is on high alert." "I neutralized the virus," Evan panted, dodging a pair of guards who were too startled to stop him. "But Juno's not happy about it. I need an extraction, now." "You idiot!" Lila hissed. "You weren't supposed to act yet." "Plans change," Evan snapped. "Get me out of here or this whole thing's going to fall apart." There was a pause, then Lila sighed. "Fine. Head to the south entrance. I'll disable the security grid." Evan didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted through the compound, weaving between patrols and automated drones. His enhanced senses picked up every sound, every vibration, guiding him through the chaos. Behind him, he could hear Juno's enraged roars echoing through the halls, a chilling reminder that she wasn't far behind. When he reached the south entrance, the security grid was already down, just as Lila had promised. She was waiting for him in a stolen transport vehicle, her expression a mix of exasperation and relief. "Get in," she shouted, slamming the door as he climbed into the passenger seat. The vehicle roared to life, tearing away from the compound as alarms continued to blare. Evan glanced out the window, his heart still racing. They'd done it. The virus was destroyed, and the lab was in chaos. But he knew it wasn't over. "Red's going to retaliate," he said, his voice grim. "He's not the kind of guy who takes setbacks lightly." Lila nodded, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You think I don't know that? We just poked a hornet's nest." "Then we'd better be ready," Evan replied. "Because the hornet's about to come after us with everything it's got." Red's fury was palpable as he stormed through the ruins of the central lab, his lieutenants trailing behind him. Juno knelt before him, her head bowed, a deep gash across her jaw where Evan's makeshift weapon had struck her. "You let him escape," Red said, his voice cold and measured. "You, my most trusted warrior, failed me." Juno's claws dug into the floor, her massive frame trembling with barely contained rage. "He's not just some ordinary human," she growled. "He's enhanced. And he's cunning." "Excuses," Red said sharply. "I don't tolerate failure, Juno. You know that." Juno raised her head, her reptilian eyes blazing. "Give me one more chance. I'll hunt him down and bring you his head." Red considered her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But you won't be going alone." He gestured to the shadows, where another hybrid stepped forward, a lithe, deadly figure with razor-sharp wings and a predatory grin. "Meet Talon," Red said. "He'll ensure you don't fail me again." Juno's jaw tightened, but she didn't protest. She simply nodded, rising to her full height. "I won't disappoint you again." "See that you don't," Red said. "And when you find Kane, make him suffer." Evan and Lila didn't have much time to regroup. They'd retreated to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a dingy apartment with barely enough space for their makeshift equipment. Lila was poring over the data she'd managed to extract from the lab, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This isn't just about the virus," she said, her voice tight. "Red's been working on something even bigger, a global deployment system. If he activates it, he could release hybrids into every major city in the world within hours." Evan leaned against the wall, his mind reeling. "How do we stop it?" "We need to take out his command center," Lila replied. "It's heavily fortified, but if we can disable the main power grid, we'll have a shot at getting inside." "And then what?" Evan asked. "Fight our way through an army of hybrids?" Lila gave him a pointed look. "Do you have a better idea?" Evan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not really. But if we're doing this, we're going to need more firepower." As if on cue, a loud crash came from outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. Evan's enhanced senses went into overdrive, his adrenaline spiking as he turned toward the window. "They found us," he said, grabbing a makeshift weapon, a crowbar, off the table. "Stay behind me." The door burst open, and Juno stepped inside, flanked by Talon. The sight of the two hybrids together was enough to send a chill down Evan's spine. Juno's sheer size was intimidating, but Talon's razor-sharp wings and predatory movements made him equally deadly. "Going somewhere?" Juno growled, her eyes locked on Evan. "Just out for a stroll," Evan replied, gripping the crowbar tightly. "Care to join us?" Juno snarled and lunged, her claws slashing through the air. Evan dodged, swinging the crowbar with all his strength. The makeshift weapon connected with her armored hide, but it barely left a dent. Talon swooped in from above, his wings slicing through the air like blades. Evan ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike. The fight was fast and brutal, the room quickly descending into chaos as furniture and equipment were smashed to pieces. "Lila, get out of here!" Evan shouted, blocking another attack from Juno. "I'm not leaving you," she yelled back, throwing a chair at Talon to distract him. Evan gritted his teeth. "You'll just slow me down. Go." Lila hesitated for a moment, then nodded reluctantly and bolted for the back door. Juno moved to follow, but Evan threw himself in her path, tackling her to the ground. She roared in fury, her claws tearing into his side, but he didn't let go. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, his enhanced strength barely keeping her pinned. Talon swooped in again, his wings slashing toward Evan's head. At the last second, Evan twisted, using Juno as a shield. Talon's blade-like wings struck her instead, drawing a howl of pain. Evan used the opening to roll away, grabbing a broken piece of furniture as a makeshift weapon. He swung it at Talon, catching him across the face and sending him crashing into the wall. The fight dragged on, brutal and relentless, until finally, Evan managed to throw both hybrids off balance long enough to escape through the back door. He sprinted into the night, his injury screaming in protest, but he didn't stop. Lila was waiting for him in a stolen car a few blocks away, the engine running. "Get in," she shouted. Evan climbed in, collapsing into the passenger seat as she hit the gas. The car sped away, leaving the hybrids behind, for now. "You okay?" Lila asked, glancing at him. Evan winced, blood seeping from the gashes on his side. "I'll live. But we're running out of time. We need to end this, now."